Okay. A couple things. Chris and I were just talking a couple ideas and thoughts before everybody arrived. One of the things that, and this bears repeating, Chris, we were talking about web browsers. And that also ties into the other thing that I want to talk about, which is called Websockets. But web browsers are owned by, whoever wants to give it to you, Microsoft or Google, or in this case Firefox, which is owned by Mozilla. And there are other browsers, Opera and Tor or whatever. But we were talking about this. Some of the main access capabilities into your organization's security infrastructure include, number one, your email, and number two, your web browser, because those are direct connections out to the internet. And that means that if somebody sets up a website that pushes vulnerabilities to your browser, and you wander by and look at it, it's a possibility that vulnerability can now be inside your infrastructure. It literally bypassed your security firewalls, your filters and everything. Why? Because remember, your browsers now are almost all operating on HTTPS, which is an encrypted protocol, which means when it passes through a firewall, the firewall can't tell what it is because it's encrypted for security, for protection. So sometimes the stuff that is a positive in one area makes it a challenge in the other area. So we were talking about web browsers, and web browsers are really a sensitive topic. Within our organization, we allow two web browsers. One is, Internet Explorer, which is being phased out, but we allow Edge and Google Chrome. And I believe the default is now Edge. Is that right, Bill?
Correct, yes, okay. To my dissatisfaction. But anyway, yes, sir. That is my understanding.
Okay, so the interesting thing is that there were a number of people long ago that said, well, I like the features in Firefox, so I want Firefox as well in the Department of Labor. And there was significant discussions about it, because not only do you have to be able to say yes or no, but you also have to say why, because the customers want to know that sort of thing. And Firefox was a very interesting case study. I started looking into it because customers were asking, and so I wanted to know why it's not allowed. So we went and looked at it and found out that Firefox can be installed by a non-administrative user, number one. So that means, let's say you have group policies in place that say only administrative users can do things like software installation on your computers. That's a very smart approach. You limit the capability to do high-level stuff to a limited group of people who are trained and responsible to do that. That makes sense. But Firefox can be installed and operated without that requirement. So that means that somebody can literally, I mean, this was in the old days. I don't know if it's changed, but somebody could go to, Firefox.org or whatever it's called, Mozilla.org, download Firefox and run Firefox on their workstations without even being an administrative user. That's pretty scary. I will give you, I'm going to give you another example because we're all staring at it. This free conference call app, that we're all using was installed on your workstations without administrative controls. So it's a concern. It's not like it's an immediate vulnerability, but it's a concern. And the thing about Firefox is that Firefox, because it corresponded with outside entities, was an opportunity for somebody to insert malware onto your workstations. And so our government agency chose to prohibit the use of Firefox. And I was telling Chris this just as Farsane came on, that our organization, one day I went out and looked and said, how many installations of Firefox are there? And there were like 32 installations of Firefox across our enterprise. And when I looked at it, it was like 7 different versions of the software. The reason is you can't manage it with a group policy. So if somebody wants to install a 5-year-old version of Firefox, they can. Yeah, and it is not you can't make that software upgrade itself, even if it has known vulnerabilities. So we were talking about that. Chris and I were, how everything fits together. Now, before we step away from this, let's talk about Windows 10 security vulnerabilities. This guy, his name is Robert Braxman, brought up a wonderful point where he said that Windows Home type workstations are inherently, in other words, by design, less secure than other operating systems such as Mac. Does anybody have any idea why? He said they are inherently less secure.
I would say because the majority of computer users use it, so you're trying to please a larger population. Not that it's a good thing, but that's my guess.
That's the really big door, yes, but why is Windows 10, the way it's designed, not how many people have it, but the way it's designed, Windows 10 in its typical installation, not in an enterprise, but your home use, why is it a vulnerability? Why does it have a built-in vulnerability?
I don't know.
If I may say,
based on DOS?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Maybe because my wife, I'm sorry. I only see myself. My wife suggests because it was originally built on DOS.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll wait.
Yeah. Go ahead. You were saying?
Who, me?
Yes, ma'am.
I think they have built in some type of firewalls in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have made some filters to stop the malware.
Uh-huh. Yeah, all of that is true. And that's designed to help make Windows 10 more secure. But by default, Chris, do you know this?
I want to say Windows Home is like a vanilla version of Home, and I'll explain what vanilla means. It's very basic, very user-friendly. It's for the common Joe or Jane or whoever to use it and make it of ease of use. It was not designed for the business purpose, and businesses need security, and therefore Enterprise and Pro are geared towards businesses, and they have more of the security features because business needs security.
Okay. I think we're all skirting around where I'm trying to go with this.
I got one question, Scott, or one suggestion.
Go ahead.
My wife says because from a different angle. My wife is suggesting because it was built on DOS way back in the day, whereas based on my understanding, iOS, Apple example, Mac is built on Unix, which to me, Unix is a much more stable operating system, but just thought.
Very, very good point, and that does get into the history of the operating systems. The original DOS and Microsoft Windows, originally Microsoft Windows was built on DOS, and then they added to it what's called the C++ object-oriented framework for the GUIs and that sort of thing. So yes, that is a thought, but when you get way back to all the origins, well, Unix is also written from a C++ or object-oriented perspective. But let me point something out. When you go to a website, let's say there's a brand new app for checking the status of your dog's water dish. You look at it and you're out on the website, you know, dogswaterdish.com, and you say, wow, I could really use that app. So what do? You click on it, you download it, and you install it. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. In the Windows 10 Home Edition, the default user has administrative rights on their own computer. So they can install whatever the heck they want, good or bad. And even if they don't know what they're doing and they click on incorrect links, stuff gets installed that not even they know about. So that's the inherent vulnerability in Windows 10 Home Edition, mostly, which most of us have, because it's less expensive. It comes free with your new computer. But you are automatically an administrative user. You can install whatever you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking by design, as a home user, then if you couldn't install something, users would complain about it and they'd look elsewhere for another OS, or they'd file a trouble ticket or something. I just want to use my recipe app. I can't use it. It says I need Mozilla or whatever, you know.
Right. You are absolutely correct. And this goes back to, I mean, when Chris and I first started this channel and the webinars, I related this conversation that I had with the information assurance chief at the Department of Labor, Tanya, I forgot her name. But anyway, when I arrived as the brand new Enterprise Service Desk lead, I walked into her office. Oh, yeah, Tanya Manning. And I said, are you the Director of Information Assurance? She said, yes. And I said, okay, I'm Scotty Ward, Enterprise Service Desk. I'm the new program manager, and I want to tell you something. You win. And she looked at me, and I said, I have a security background, and I want to tell you that if there's ever a discussion between ease of use and security, you win. I am on your side, and we're going to do this from a secure perspective and then figure out how to do the ease of use. You're not going to have that fight with me, well, you know, sorry, but this CEO needs to get to his bowling league scores, and so therefore we have to open this up. No, let's start from a secure perspective and then build features on. So, and this is a constant tug of war going on between operations and ease of use and security and ongoing ability to make sure that the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of the data is not compromised. So just so you know, that's called the CIA Triad, and it is quite likely in your Security Plus exam. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. CIA. That is the basis for information assurance and security operations. So anyway, so that's why Windows 10 has a built-in problem because you're at the wheel and you have the ability to do things that maybe you didn't intend to do. So if some feature or website or email can trick you into clicking on the right things, they can allow your system to become vulnerable and you don't even realize it occurred. So that's a built-in, the guy's name is Rob Braxman, Braxman, and he's worth a watch on YouTube, just so you know. Anything else on that before I move on to topic number 2?
Yes, if I may.
Sure.
2 things. Number 1, I think the vulnerability goes across the board for any and all systems. So it is not something that is only for Windows 10 or whomever. As you see right now, businesses, I don't know, hundreds or thousands or millions, they're getting hacked back to back to back, small or large.
Right.
So does it mean they are not vulnerable, or they were not vulnerable, or they were vulnerable? It means that vulnerability goes across the line. And until we can put that filter or that firewall, that's going to be a huge time. No, number 2, you talked about Mozilla, whatever you pronounce it.
Yes.
And
Mozilla.
Mozilla, yeah, and its production of what do? They do
Firefox.
Firefox. As much as you, of course, the company would not allow it to be. I have worked for the government for long time, and millions of things are not allowed, not just this or that.
Right.
And then, but if somebody knows how to use Mozilla and use the Firefox at home, it is marvelous. It is marvelous. And then, again, if somebody knows just a little bit about their home computer on how to build numerous firewalls on it, meaning they can somehow, for example, with this Firefox, you can turn on the wash machine, you can open the door, you can turn on the AC, you can turn off all of these things, you can turn on the microwave. It is so advanced, but they do know that because they're a very small company and they cannot sell it to the government entities, so they are just keeping it for geeks, that they're enjoying these stuff, and they do numerous things. As a matter of fact, one of their features that is, of course, I don't use it, I don't know much, my son knows very well, and he uses it. They can get free cable. The cable that everybody pays $100 minimum per month through Mozilla. So that's all I have.
Yeah.
I was just going.
Go ahead, Bill.
No, I'm sorry. I'll let you respond.
Well, the point is that you always have to balance between convenience and security. The challenge is how to do that without upsetting either group. There are capabilities and features that would be absolutely beneficial, but with that feature could come vulnerabilities. And us in the cybersecurity field, we're supposed to research and know those vulnerabilities so that our leadership can make an informed decision on what they want to do with it. You know?
Sure.
So that's why we have to stay smart on these new technologies. But again, this Rob Braxman guy pointed out, he said that it doesn't matter if somebody just uses Windows 10 to look at their grandchildren's daycare, watching their grandkids while they're playing on the playground at their daycare center or whatever. They still have the ability to download the wrong things and install them on their Windows 10 computer, so then it could be used. For example, a couple of years ago, there was that massive distributed denial of service attack against Amazon Web Services. Literally downed Amazon because a couple million computers worldwide were all compromised and were told to attack Amazon Web Services simultaneously. The people who operated these systems didn't know it, but they were unknowingly participating in a malicious act against another company. So, there are numerous features that could be weaponized. I guess that's a way of saying it. And you just have to be aware of it so that you don't agree to implement it without fully understanding the implications of doing so. So, Bill?
I was just going to add an example. I recall a new version, at that time it was probably Internet Explorer. An update was deployed, and then it came time for employee appraisals, and there was probably an Adobe Acrobat plugin that either was not compatible with the upgraded Internet Explorer version, or for whatever reason, supervisors couldn't open the PDF files to give their employees ratings, and that's a time crunch. So it required a lot of scrambling to get that working. But again, it's a matter of, well, I've locked down, I've made some setting changes potentially to my browser engine to make it more secure, but as a result, I've restricted something that people have to do to perform their duties.
Right. It's a balance. I think most recently, and this is the latest example I can think of, forever, Apple specifically, iOS devices, would not allow the use of shockwave flash. And, a lot of people said, oh, well, that's because Apple owns whatever their proprietary video playing technology was, and I forget what it was called. But anyway, they were saying, oh, well, they are doing it, on a because they want to push people toward their technology.
Scotty, was it QuickTime?
Yes. It was QuickTime. So everybody was saying, oh, well, they don't like shockwave flash because they want people to use QuickTime. But Apple pointed out that QuickTime had built-in vulnerabilities that Apple was not willing to accept. And so for years, I remember, there would be stuff coming out. Originally, YouTube used QuickTime, and therefore Apple devices, Macs, had problems with YouTube because by default, the default configuration or protocol for YouTube was Flash, and Apple devices used QuickTime, so therefore there had to be some sort of translation or you'd get a blank screen. And people complained about it tremendously. Well, to vindicate Apple, guess what everybody is now getting rid of because of its security vulnerabilities? Shockwave flash. We have just gone through a project in our organization to remove all instances of the shockwave flash player because of security vulnerabilities. And, of course, here's Apple way back in 2013 or something saying, "Woohoo, told you so," it's a question of how much risk are you willing to accept. But you have to make sure, we as the cyber-trained people have to make sure that our management are aware of and can communicate those vulnerabilities and features so that they are both presented and the decision can be made based on that. It can't just be the CEO wants his, electronic Game Boy to play in his office or whatever. There has to be a review of whether something has vulnerabilities and whether those vulnerabilities constitute an acceptable level of risk. Okay, so just something to think about as we're doing this. I wanted to talk about something a couple months ago now. We had a discussion about what we call the Internet of Things, or IoT devices. And one of the devices that we never discussed was electronic picture playing devices. And my wife and I were over at a friend's house yesterday, and they had this cute little electronic picture frame. Now, back in the day, the picture frame was not internet connected. In other words, you'd plug it into your computer and you'd download the pictures or videos or whatever onto this electronic frame and then unplug it from your computer and set it up on the, in the living room, and it would sit and play these photos. It was a photo frame. But the thing is that over time, they have now developed internet accessible picture frames. So and again, we were at our neighbor's house yesterday, and I was really impressed by this electronic picture frame. These are grandparents that are next to us, and they say, yeah, our two kids, we've got one in the West Coast, one on the East Coast, and one of them sends us new photos every Tuesday, and the other one sends us new photos every Friday. So twice a week, this picture frame gets refreshed with our kids and grandkids' photos. And, they send it in, and our picture frame automatically updates. But they send it in from across the nation. So I wanted to look into this. These are called internet-connected picture frames. And this one, which I believe is the most popular one in America, is called Nixplay. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, but Nixplay allows this, and the photos are actually stored through, I think it's Amazon Web Services, by way of Nixplay.com. But your photo frame goes out to Dropbox or Amazon and picks up the information and then plays it on the frame. So, wanting to be diligent at this. Oh, good morning, Douglas. Welcome. So, wanting to be diligent about this, I said, how secure is my Nixplay frame? And I went out to Nixplay.com and I looked it up. And here's what they say. They said, Nixplay regards your safety and security throughout the product lifecycle, starting from the factory floor. Okay, well, that's obviously an advertising discussion, but they're basically saying, everybody's on board doing this. All firmware updates come from authorized Nixplay servers and are signed with a private key. Do you remember we talked about certificate signing? That's what a private key means. If that private key is kept secure, then basically what I would do if I was the Nixplay frame, I would say, what is the key that generated this session that's sending me photos? So that's a very smart way of doing it, if Nixplay keeps their private key secure. If somehow their private key is divulged, then no, it's not secure. And, you know, they say it prevents tampering with package content. Great. They say third-party components that could communicate are not included in the firmware. In other words, our frame will only accept sessions from Nixplay servers. Good point. Not just anybody can get to my picture frame. Makes sense. It also says Nixplay doesn't expose itself to public access. Now this one is an interesting one. It says Nixplay, what it's referring to is your frame, not nixplay.com. But it doesn't expose itself to public access through user routers, and what it means by that, sadly, it goes back to the HTTPS sessions through the use of, let me find it, here it is, Websockets. Built into Websockets, the Websockets protocol is HTTPS. So when it says they don't expose themselves to routers, what they mean is by the time it gets to the router, it's already encrypted. Okay, that's pretty good. And the only way of hacking in is to use the router or PC if the PC or router has been compromised. Well, you and I both know that routers and PCs can be compromised. So that's not exactly something that makes me feel warm and fuzzy, but so far I'm not afraid of Nixplay. They say as new product lines are developed with Wi-Fi and photo sharing capabilities, we've made sure that any exposure to third-party operating systems is obsolete through WebSockets. And is there anybody here? Well, let's just wander over to WebSockets. I went over to look at what are the common security issues with WebSockets, and it's called WS:/ instead of HTTPS://. But it's very, very similar. It is a encrypted protocol, and it is a point-to-point protocol. So if you and I both agree that we're going to encrypt, then everything from that point onward stays encrypted for the entire session. That's a good way of doing it. But as it's doing this, you have to ask yourself, can your WebSockets be hijacked by somebody else? In most cases, they can't, because this is a point-to-point encryption tied into using the WS:/ protocol. So that's a pretty good approach. However, there is a downside to encryption. Can anybody tell me, if you're trying to do things like, in this case, passing large amounts of data, what's the downside to session encryption, point-to-point encryption? Bill?
Slow transmission.
Why do you say it's slow? You're right, but why do you say it's slow?
Because you have to take your data and encrypt it before it's sent, send it, and then on the other end, receive it, and then unencrypt it, and then get more data until your full package or packets are received.
That's the word I wanted to hear. Every packet has that encryption header on it, which takes up what's called overhead. And I'm using this as an example. Everybody can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Let's pretend that this is a packet, and there's all of this data in the packet. But if, let's say, I don't think, I'll just try and do a snip. And let's say I'm looking at this, and this much of my elevator is taken up by overhead. You know, let's say there's about 10 people in the elevator, but 3 of those people are for packet encryption information. That means only 7 or in this case, like 70% of my packet can be used for data. So that's exactly right, Bill. What you say is things are slower because every packet now carries more and more and more encryption, key, PKI, that sort of thing with it as it travels. So you're hurling hundreds of megabytes down the pipeline, but automatically a certain percentage of it is consumed by overhead and therefore can't be used by your data transmission. So you have to have longer transmissions or bigger pipes. Yep, absolutely right, Bill.
And am I right that the higher the level of encryption, say 250 from 128 to 256 and so on, then the larger, the less data you have available in that packet? Or not?
Yes, that is correct. So, for example, lower levels of, and this is, here's the payoff or the trade-off. Lower levels of encryption have smaller packet overhead, but they have a higher possibility of being compromised. So, and the main difference between the two is the length of what's called the encryption key, K-E-Y. And when they say it's 128-bit encryption or 256-bit encryption, they're talking about the size of the key. The key is 256 bytes. Well, if you're doing a 1 kilobyte packet, that's 1/4 of your packet is that key. So then you say, well, maybe we could do this based on session instead of packet encryption. Well, because then the keys are only exchanged at the beginning and at the end doing what's called a handshake. That's cool. That is more helpful. But when you do that, you could lose what? Any ideas?
Some of your data?
Because of what? You're right, but you could lose some of your data.
My thought is there is the possibility of error every time you transmit a packet. So
exactly.
The larger the packet, the more data in the packet, the potential is greater that you would have error than if you had smaller packets. And also, if there is an error, then it has to retransmit. If you're transmitting just 10% of the entire set of packets, then you'll recover, quote unquote, faster than you would if you had the entire set of packets. If that sounds right?
Yes, you're right. So you're talking about data checks. Every once in a while, if you're doing a long stream, and I'm using that word specifically, a long stream of packets, every once in a while you have to go back and say, I've sent you 2,000 packets, I've received 2,000 packets, good, let's keep going. But what if one says, oh, I only received 1,999 packets? You have to restart and send those 2,000 packets over again until they both agree that 2,000 packets were sent and 2,000 packets were received. So you get into what's called quality of service. And this is where we have what's called TCP protocol, which is very high integrity, very high quality, and that's used for things like banking transactions, or if you are, doing something with your credit card information or whatever, that has to be extremely precise. However, if you're connecting to, I don't know, let's call it Netflix, and it's pushing, copious amounts of data, and it drops a bit here and there, that's not such a big deal. So that's known as UDP, or Universal Datagram Protocol is, I think, what it's called, UDP, as compared to TCP Transmission Control Protocol. TCP is higher quality. UDP, because it streams, it's designed for higher bandwidth but lower quality. So that, in using my elevator here, more and more and more of your pieces within that packet are dedicated to data rather than checking on quality.
Scotty, I have a
Yes.
question.
Sure.
Is there any way that when you are sending these emails or whatever, with that kind of security, instead of the packet to be size of 2,000 data, sending it in the smaller quantities?
Yes, there is the ability to do that. Packets are normally set at a uniform size, depending upon what traffic is being transferred between the two. And that's normally done at the router level or the switch level so that they stay as efficient as possible. So that's all behind the scenes. You don't care when you're accessing your bank, but the routers want to make sure that they are transmitting data as effectively as possible. That's why, and if anybody has been involved in putting together network infrastructure, you, by default, if you stand up a router, it does not have some of that extra quality built into it. It's available, but it's not turned on because that router is currently optimized for speed. And you can, it's called Quality of Service, or QoS, you can enable quality of service features on your particular router or routers and infrastructure, and they will take into account things like the quality of the packets more frequently than a regular default router out of the box. So when you hear that somebody's turning on QoS, you basically have to make sure that your pipes are big enough to handle more packets rather than fewer. It's no longer optimized for speed. It's now being optimized for quality instead. And like out of Netflix, they don't optimize for quality. They optimize for speed.
Oh, I know the difference, but my question is, can we ask for quality of service to be optimized? Can we ask our company, whoever, to optimize the quality and the speed and so on and so forth?
Usually that's done by the system owners. In other words, the people who own the network infrastructure, and they will, they are going to be amenable to turning on quality of service if you're doing large amounts of streaming and you have already noticed that you're getting errors in the work that you're doing. You know, you're doing streaming, but it's got a lot of dropped frames and that sort of thing. You know, you typically have to demonstrate an operational need to turn on that quality because it does use more people in the elevator, you know, to use our example, for quality of service, which means less people are available for data, actual data transfer.
If I may, I don't know if it's going to be same issue, but I'm going to just throw it at all of us, or at the issue that majority of companies, I mean, I'm just going to say companies, whatever, government, of course government, federal, and so on, they would like to get the maximum quality / benefit with the minimum cost. And that's one of the biggest issues that these days is killing us. They keep talking about the least amount of cost, cost efficiency, blah, blah, blah. And then they are just sometimes they're asking, right now I have been asked by one of the federal departments, of course there are two of them connected, to write the manual for them. Because they have discovered that I'm the only person from the 60 instructors that they have for free. And I have refused. Because their budget is this and everything has to be cost effective and da-da-da-da-da. No. No.
Yeah.
The point, you might think that I'm a selfish person, but it is at least 2-3 months of deep research and putting together a very efficient manual that they have never had it. And now they want to create it because ever since the COVID, now that we are doing our classes or conferences, just like right now, through these online systems, now they are going to a new phase and they need some new things. In the past, they used to send one instructor to California, for example, and they would teach for 1 month and they would come back. But now, things have changed. And as far as we know, right now, this COVID story could be for another 4 years. And we don't know even what's going on for the next step. However, these two federal agencies, one of them is the Navy and the other one is NLS, they are just trying to get their things done with $0 expense. So that's another thing that kind of is included in all of our conversations about the quality of our, when you are sending a packet, what it is, so on and so, you know what I'm talking about. That's all. I just wanted to mention this.
Yeah. And this, the people basically have to be convinced that there is a need for them to spend money. We talked about this frequently, and that is that we always have to be speaking in reference to the business and not the technology. If people are just talking from a technology perspective, they don't understand why it costs so much. They're sort of like, well, how is it that it costs us, thousands of dollars a month to do our email when we could use Gmail and it's free?
Yep.
Right.
True.
You have to have that conversation at their level, let's call it the C level. The people who are allowed to commit funds have to understand your issue.
And the customer. You mentioned the term, Scotty, earlier. And I lost it. Accepting the risk. So what comes to mind when I worked on some options with our network services provider. So say if we're standing up a data center, some data center connectivity, then there are options there for availability.
Yep.
And I hope I didn't lose you. I was trying to turn my camera on.
You didn't. I just stopped screen sharing.
Oh, okay.
So we can still hear you.
Okay. Sorry, where was it? Oh, so for example, if you want a quote hot site or a warm site or a cold site,
right?
In the event of the site failure and you have to fail over from one site A to site B, how quickly? What is the? Now I lost the term again. You have to accept the risk, I guess. So the customer needs to know, okay, well, we can do 3 things or whatever, but you need to understand that option 1, it may take us 2 weeks to get users back online. Option 2 might take 2 days, and option 3 might take 2 minutes. But
right.
you got to pay for those options.
Yep.
The other thing about quality of service, what comes to mind with the IVR system, is they rely on voice quality for recording voicemail and that sort of thing, messaging, whatever. And so if the connection is poor, then you're not going to hear the person's voice, say if it's something critical, like I have a case number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or something like that, or my case is Johnson versus Johnson, or whatever. If you can't hear that, or your call gets dropped, or whatever, that is a major problem. Whereas if in the, quote, background, Outlook is synchronizing your email from your local workstation to the cloud, that's not so critical. So I think the quality of service, pardon me if I understand it, you can set on your network the types of data transmission, the types of data that you're transmitting, and adjust the quality of service between them.
Yeah, you can optimize for what's called quality of service. There's actually a feature that says, UDP gets higher priority than TCP, and large packet streaming is automatically given priority on the switch, for example. Those are some of the features in quality of service. But when you turn quality of service on, that means overall your data is going to move more slowly. So you have to adjust for that in your business and say, do I need bigger pipes? Do I need faster switches? Do I need, there's a trade-off. It costs, even if it's just a reduced bandwidth, reduced throughput, is that acceptable? And the time to make that decision is before you've implemented it and everybody's complaining now.
Yeah, that's what comes to mind. The lady who was speaking, she's asked to do something now for something that's been in place for some period of time. That's putting the cart before the horse.
Right.
It should have been done when it was before it was installed, and then somebody make the decision, accept the risk, and sign on the dotted line, yes, I accept this risk or this quality service. And then, if there's an adjustment required, then it would be a relatively minor tweaking, potentially. Right.
You remember those, gosh, I forgot what it's called, but the commercials where it was payday loans or whatever it was, where they're saying, it's my money and I want it now. It's my money and I want it now. Well, that's a typical customer approach. All I need is for you to do this right for me and implement it today. I could implement it at home just like that. Well, yes, but then, so we have to be able to correspond with them to their level of understanding. And it's our responsibility to communicate what could be some very cryptic and difficult to understand criteria that cannot be bypassed because, gosh darn it, I need it now. So
I've heard that of I can do this at home. Why can't I do it now? It's a simple website or it's a simple whatever.
So anyway, good talk, folks. Any questions? We're out of time. Any questions before we finish up?
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Sure. Me too. Chris, anything before we go? And by the way, Doug, welcome. Haven't heard a word from you today.
None from me.
I didn't want to interrupt.
Okay. All right. Good. That's all I have, folks. I appreciate it, and we'll catch you around the Facebook group or the email group.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.